Hello and welcome. I'm Silvia Pavoni, economics editor of The Banker, and I'm in Buenos Aires for the G20 meeting on the Institute of International Finance. I'm here with the CEO of the IIF, Tim Adams. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So the event started yesterday, and you kicked off proceedings with your introductions, which kind of took the pulse of where we are in terms of the economy, global economy, and international flows of capital. So where are we?
We're in a very good shape, the best shape we've been in probably 15 years. Global economy across the board is performing better than we've seen in a long, long time, reaching almost every corner of the global economy. Capital flows are up, trade flows are up, cross-border banking flows are up. So it's time to take stock and celebrate a bit the good news that's going on.
So the positive news coming out of the world, but there are also some tensions in terms of trade, of course. We still have to. We can't be complacent, no. and many people and situations are keeping us interested.
That is correct. So I'm paid to worry. So we can't celebrate too much. There's lots of things to worry about. I don't see anything in the near term, i.e. in the next 6 months to a year, but there are lots of problems out there. Trade frictions are potential, and a potential trade war. I don't think we're going to have one, but we could. There's a lot of uncertainty with respect to trade. Debt, the global economy has really levered up in the past 8 years, 60 trillion additional debt, 320% of GDP with respect to global debt. Sovereigns, household, corporates, a lot of debt floating around out there in a very favorable interest rate environment. What happens when the interest rates change? And they will go up simply because of just normalization in response to faster growth. So lots of things to be concerned about out there.
What about data? I know that also is a cause for celebration, the new growth asset of the 21st century, but also something that really banks and financial institutions in general need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you're right. I mentioned oil was the great asset of the 20th century, data is the 21st century. Our last board meeting, much of the conversation was about data localization, privacy, who owns it, how do you monetize it, how do you protect it, who has access to it. So we're in the data business, and we have to think about what that looks like, especially vis-a-vis other firms that are in the data business, like internet platform companies.
That's right, and which leads us to the potential cooperation between the traditional established banking sector and the fintechs. So we are obviously in Latin America. Mexico, we're not in Mexico, but Mexico has just passed legislation that regulates fintechs, which potentially can transform the local markets. So where are we in terms of how the banking sector is changing?
That's a great question. I think we're certainly watching fintech, smaller firms. I think banks can acquire or partner with many of those firms. It's the large global internet platform companies that really cause one to be concerned just because of their size and their scale and their scope. And they don't face the same regulatory agenda that we do. If they become financial intermediaries and they pose the same risk, they should face the same regulations.
So there was an interesting panel exactly on financial regulation, and one of the points that was raised is this, that a lot of banking activity happens outside of the banking sector, and therefore it's not regulated accordingly. So how are things going to change in the future? Do you see a bigger impetus to regulate those activities?
Well, I think we need to watch it. And again, if it looks like banking and it is financial intermediation and it poses a systemic risk, then why wouldn't you treat it the same way? And I think policymakers are coming to that conclusion. So I think we're getting there. I don't think it should be premature, but obviously if it's the same risk, same regulation.
Perfect. And as the last comment, where do you see the financial and banking sector moving in the future? How will banks look like in the future?
More nimble, smaller in the sense of staffing. Artificial intelligence, machine learning is changing both the front end and the back end. We are a consumer-driven data company, different than what we used to think of banking 10 or 20 years ago.
So quite a lot to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Well, it makes our job interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you for having me.